Hello, and welcome back. Have a seat, please, and we're going to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the distinct pleasure this evening, it is evening now, to welcome Tiffany D. Jackson, the New York Times best-selling author, right here to the stage at Trinity Prep School. And without further ado, I'm going to let her talk because I know that some of you kids hear me talk all the time and y'all much rather listen to her. So without further ado, Miss Jackson.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah? Okay. No? Yes? No? Hey, there we go. Hi. Hi, everyone. It is so good to be here, especially since I feel like I was supposed to come here sometime during the pandemic. I've also been hearing about this since probably, when did I meet you at Project Lit? 5, 6 years ago. So I've been jealous of all of my friends that have come here before me. And I was like, well, where is my invite? And now that I'm here, I'm really happy to be here, despite this humid weather, as you can see from my hair. I want to tell you a little bit about my journey to publishing, because it's been an interesting journey. And then I'm going to open it up to questions, because I feel like one of the things that I realized when I was a kid, when I was your age, is I didn't meet my first author until I was deep into college. And I told myself if I ever become an author one day that I'm going to make myself readily available to anyone who wants to talk and ask questions about how to get here, because I did not have an example of that in my schools. So without further ado, hi. My name is Tiffany D. Jackson. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I went to Hendrick Cousin High School, which is a high school right outside the city. I graduated from with a degree in film and television from Howard University. What's missing from the slide, I also actually have a master's in media studies from the New School University. I've been working in film and television for the past 15 years, but now I'm actually currently a full-time writer with Catherine Teen Books, which is an imprint at HarperCollins, and also a couple of others. I should probably shout them out, but they ain't here, so. I have worked at a lot of places. So I started my journey at National Geographic, and I realized very quickly, literally the day after graduation, that I am not a wilderness girl whatsoever. I am not into lions, tigers, and bears, so I left National Geographic, moved up to New York, started at Rock Nation. Rock Nation is actually Jay-Z's label. So I was working with a lot of artists like Jay-Z, Rita Ora, Bridget Kelly, J. Cole, to name a few. Left Rock Nation, went to BET. Left BET, went to Fuse TV. At both channels, I was working mostly on hip-hop awards, hip-hop documentaries, etc. Left Fuse TV, went to BBC America. That was my first, scripted gig. I was working on the Doctor Who after show. I don't know anything about Doctor Who, so before you gasp, just know that I had no idea what I was doing. But I was there. Left BBC America, went to Epix TV. But throughout this entire tenure, I also did a lot of side hustle gigs. I worked on this Walmart commercial, the Sweet Tail Pie, Patti LaBelle commercial, a bunch of other things that you've probably seen, and I was always the woman in the background. But throughout this entire tenure, I was always writing. I always wanted to be a writer. This is me at 3 years old. I always like to show this picture because, one, I look like a happy child because I did actually have a very happy childhood. Two, I've always had a lot of hair. And three, I was always a very obnoxiously tall child. I was like that kid they always put at the end of the class. And I stopped growing and I'm like, thank Jesus, but okay. When everyone asks me about my journey, they always say, what made you want to be a writer? And I really have no answer for that because I just always knew I wanted to be a writer. I always tell the story when I was around 4 years old. Do you guys remember when you used to practice your letters and little trace books, etc. like that? Yeah, right? So I was in my room practicing my letters, and I realized if I put letters together, I could spell a word. And so I tried. So the first word that I spelled on my own at 4 years old was the word nose. And I took the book, I ran to the kitchen, I was like, Mom, I'm a genius. I'm gonna be a writer. And she immediately was like, no. Because see, I'm actually from an immigrant household. My mother's side of the family is from Jamaica. My father's side is from Trinidad, which means I am equal parts crazy. And usually when you come from an immigrant household, your parents want you to be a lawyer, a doctor, evil scientist, whatever, as long as you make money. And the idea of their oldest daughter going into the writing field, which, immediately they think starving artists, wasn't really attracted to them. I will fast forward that story to say that my parents actually pretend like they never said that to me. And they are always on tour with me. My dad actually sells my books out the back of his car. So, very proud parents. This is actually me in high school with maybe about, I want to say, maybe 90% of the kids of color that was in my high school. And this is actually at our Black Student Union as well, too. This is actually around the time that I was actually diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And I remember specifically this day because, you did a lot of testing. I was actually diagnosed pretty late. I was diagnosed when I was 16, 17. So it was a lot of time missed, but I definitely made up for it, through the learning center, et cetera. But I specifically remember going into the guidance counselor office and him specifically saying to my mom, well, because of this diagnosis, you should probably, lower your expectations for your daughter's future, that she may not want to consider doing something so, eccentric. And my mom sent me out the room and cursed that man out. And I always like to tell this story specifically because, one, I know there are plenty of students with learning disabilities, and I am still one of them. In fact, I still use a lot of the tips and tools that I learned in high school, i.e. this presentation, because I cannot talk to y'all without, stuff. But I always like to say that, yes, I came from someone who didn't believe in me in terms of a guidance counselor. So if you do have teachers that truly believe in you, or if you have librarians, educators, whatever, hold on to them because they are special human beings. So how did it go in terms of becoming a writer? So on one slide, you have me. As I said, I was still writing during the entire time I was working in film and television. In fact, this one particular day, I worked on a book until I would wake up every day. Let me give you an idea of my day. I would wake up every day at 5 a.m. to write. I would leave to get on the subway around 8:30 to actually get to work by 10. I would be in the studio or on set till about 6 or 7, but I would be writing throughout that entire time. So every time we took a break, every time there was lunch, I was traveling, because I did travel a lot. I was writing on planes, trains, automobiles, whatever. In fact, there's a really hilarious photo, which I can't seem to find, of me working behind the scenes of a Kanye West concert. And I had my headphones on, and I was working, and it looked like I was typing a very important email, but I was actually working on a short story. On the other slide, you see me actually signing my first contract. This is my 2-book deal with HarperCollins that I signed back in 2015. It took a lot to get there. And my first book, which is allegedly, this is actually was my dog, Oscar. He passed away a couple of years ago. I always like to shout him out because he actually was 14 when he died, so that means, I'm sorry, he was 15 when he died. So that means that he was with me throughout basically my entire tenure. He sat in my book bag on set. He watched me write this book. So he gets a lot of praise because, he sacrificed a lot of puppy time for me to become an author. So this is my first book, Allegedly. Allegedly is about a girl who is convicted of murder at 9 years old, and now she's 16 and pregnant, and the only way to keep her baby is to prove that she was innocent. But the only way to do that is through her mother, who she has a very contentious relationship with. Sounds pretty dark, right? Well, actually, this book is actually loosely inspired by a real case that happened. I don't know if you could read that, but it says August 31st, 2012, Maine girl 10 accused of death of her 3-month-old that her mother was babysitting. I like to write thrillers and murders and horror that is based on real life. And not based, mostly inspired, because I do like to go into the depths of this type of society, the depths of these types of cases, to kind of understand how these things actually happen. In order to actually write this, I actually had to do a lot of research. So I talked to lawyers, doctors, psychologists, and I actually talked to, I believe it was 5 girls who've been through the juvenile justice system, and I took all of their stories and put them into one character named Mary. My second book, Monday's Not Coming, is another book that's loosely inspired by a real case. This is about a girl named Claudia whose best friend Monday is missing, and no one seems to notice until she shows up 1 year later. This book is loosely inspired by 2 real cases. One that happened back in 2008, DC woman charged in the murder of 4 girls. This was called the Benita Jax case. It's about 4 girls who had been missing, ages I think 4 to 13, who were found finally. They were brutally murdered by their mother, but they had been missing for about 3 to 4 months, and no one actually reported them missing. In fact, a lot of the nationwide attendance sort of policies was actually due to this case. So if it feels like teachers are kind of like hounding you down, trying to figure out where you are, that is because of this. And the second case I don't usually talk about because it actually spoils the whole ending of the book. This book actually talks a lot about why are missing Black and brown children not a national priority. This book is also, I believe, one of the, I think I'm number 36, most banned book in the US right now. Yay. It's banned for interesting reason. It's been told that there's sexual content. There's no sexual content. There was told that there was critical race theory. There's nothing about race in this book at all. This book is actually about the story about best friendship and about missing Black children in a cultural society. The fact that they are Black makes it an issue. But I digress. My third book, Let Me Hear a Rhyme, is set in Brooklyn in 1998, so it's historical fiction. It's about a year after Biggie Smalls dies, and it's 2 teen boys who plot to turn their murdered best friend into a rap superstar by pretending he's still alive. This book is very much a love letter to Brooklyn, a love letter to hip-hop, a love letter to the now and then, the idea of some of our musical icons being assassinated and how that has affected us in terms of, our culture and the way we operate. And especially since hip-hop is only 50 years old, which means that a lot of, in fact, actually, I'm sorry, hip-hop turns 50 this month. I don't know if anyone knows that in here. So we're celebrating the 50th year of hip hop. And I wrote specifically about 1998, which is considered the Phoenix year in hip hop. But what I love about this book is that even though it's quote unquote considered historical fiction, your parents actually lived through this. So this is not like, there's not horses and carriages and stuff like that. Like, this is like, you could actually talk to your parents about the beginnings of hip hop and you could talk about your experience of hip hop, because ideally, if you are listening to hip hop, you are actually a part of the culture and you should know its background and its history. My fourth book, called Grown. Grown is about a 17-year-old aspiring singer who is swooned by a legendary older superstar promises of fame that leads her to turn against her friends and family. But when his body shows up, all fingers point to her. And so now she must find the voice to shed the light on her past and also prove her innocence. So a lot of people feel that this story is loosely inspired by the R. Kelly case, but it's actually not inspired by the R. Kelly case. It's actually inspired by the reaction to the R. Kelly case. A lot of people were blaming the girls specifically in that case, saying, why did they go there? Why did they do this? Why didn't they fight back? They shouldn't have left. They shouldn't have gone with him, etc., which is a lot about victim blaming. And so I wanted to really shed light on that, and specifically because in specifically an age-inappropriate relationship, there's only 2 people involved in an age-inappropriate relationship, an adult and a child. And an adult should know better, and we should be holding those adults accountable for those actions, not the child that's involved. And just to be fully clear, I too was also in an age-inappropriate relationship. My first quote-unquote boyfriend was 22 and I was 15. And it was probably one of the darkest secrets I ever kept from my family. They didn't know actually until this book landed. So, I'm sure that was a great summer for me. Uh, But I do like talking about it because, one, I feel that it's important to note, especially for girls who are going through something like this, that you are not defined by your mistakes, that you can actually go on and move on from those type of situations, go on to graduate high school, college, get your master's degree, work in television, and become a New York Times bestselling author. Thank you. I love horror. I grew up watching horror all the time. And so, of course, a lot of people actually thought, why haven't you wrote a horror yet? And so I finally did. My 5th book was called White Smoke. It is my favorite genre of horror, which is haunted house. And it's about a girl named Marigold whose newly blended family moved to a dilapidated city into a brand new home that she feels is haunted, but it's something far more sinister. And this book is actually, it was a blurb by R.L. Stine, and he called it Creepy, Frightening, I Wanted to Scream. Now, let me tell you something. So R.L. Stine is literally the reason why I'm even a reader. I remember literally the day my teacher brought me into a Scholastic book fair, walked me up to this table and said, you are going to love these books. That's actually Miss Fulford. Miss Fulford was my 2nd, 5th, and 6th grade teacher. If you've ever come to any of my launches, you probably saw her there. And a lot of people actually ask me about my process. Now, I did say I do a lot of research. I do a lot of in-person research. I am in the trenches doing research, but I also do visualization boards or mood boards. This is actually a mood board from Maple Street, which is a part of the book. And this is the character Marigold. I put 2 words together there. And that's she's based on Zendaya's character in Euphoria, which I hope none of you are watching. So some of my other works, I co-wrote a book with Ilyasha Shabazz, who's Malcolm X's daughter. It's called The Waking of Malcolm X, and that is about his awakening in prison and finding Allah. I wrote Blackout with some amazing authors, Danielle Clayton, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. It is about, it's basically 6 interconnected love stories that take place during New York City blackout. And I also wrote my first picture book called Santa in the City, and this is actually my autobiography, the only autobiography you're ever going to get from me. And it is about a young girl who is inspired to still believe in Santa, even though she lives in the city. One of the examples I give in this book, specifically because when I was younger, I used to be like, hey, how can... Sorry, I'm just making sure there's no babies in the room. How can Santa get into our apartment if we have no chimney? And my mom used to say, well, Santa has a key, like the super, and he can get into all of the buildings all over the world. And I said, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And so literally, those are the examples I put into this. So that is my only picture book. And my latest work, The Weight of Blood, how many of you have ever seen Carrie? So this is actually loosely homage to Carrie. It is about a girl who is passing for white at the behest of a very fanatical father who is outed in a surprise rainstorm, i.e. her classmates learn that she is actually black or biracial, and decide to bully her. But then some classmates are worried that the school may look racist, and so decide to host their first integrated prom, i.e. before they were only having black and white proms. But some of the students aren't interested in changing that tradition, so they decide to play one more trick on Maddie, but what they don't know is Maddie has another dark secret that's going to cost the entire town their lives. Ooh. It came out this past September. It's a prom night theme, so it's a prom book. I actually didn't go to my senior prom, but I did a lot of research. There's true crime podcast, meaning that there actually is a podcast is actually the spine of the book. There's star-crossed lovers. There's a football story. I know nothing about football, so that was also a very interesting research expedition. Microaggression, there's also history of segregation. This book is loosely inspired by a real event that happened back in 2014. A school decided to host their first, a school in Georgia, a small town in Georgia, were still hosting segregated proms. And the only way they were able to get away with that is because the prom was not a school function event, it was hosted through their community. So they decided to host their first integrated prom. But of course, some people were very much against this idea, and it became a very interesting debacle, and it was actually covered by CNN. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why would anyone want to still continue to have black and white proms? And then when I went and did a lot of research about it, it turns out there's a lot of small southern towns that are still hosting black and white proms. And I thought, this is madness, but here's a book about it. And just to skip, because I feel like everyone always asks me this, like, oh, is any of your things turning into movies? Yes. So Let Me Hear Rhymes being turned into a series by 50 Cent's company, and it's going to be on the Peacock app. It's being directed by Morgan Cooper, who is directing the Bel Air series. Blackout is being turned into a series and a movie for Netflix. It is being produced by the Obamas. And White Smoke is being turned into a TV series. And I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about anything else about that, because I honestly don't know. And there's some other things on the fire, but these are the things that have been announced, so I'm actually able to say something about it. And see, that was my spiel. Wasn't that like short, sweet, to the point? But no, I do want to thank you. I do want to leave a couple of notes because I do feel that, like I said, I didn't meet an author until I was literally I think a sophomore in college. But if I had met an author even in my, I don't know, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, I would have totally followed my dream much earlier. And I do believe that one of the things that happens when you have a dream is that your dreams don't actually let you go, right? They literally hold on to you. And your dream may morph because, quite frankly, I actually thought I was going to be writing one book, one adult book, and I was just going to be the old lady by the sea and never see anybody ever again. And here I am back in high schools talking to kids everywhere. And I love it, actually. I really do love being able to come and into schools, talk to educators, go to conferences, things that I didn't even know about. I actually speak in a lot of prisons and juvenile justice halls, juvenile detention centers as well too. And I speak a lot about the idea of following your dreams and following your heart, and that though your dream may look completely different or it may pivot, it's still your dream. And you have to be obedient to that call of the dream. You can't just kind of try to bury it and think that it's just gonna go away. No, you always have to be obedient to that call of the dream. Whether that means that you wanna be a Pokemon master, or you wanna play video games for the rest of your life, or you want to be a rapper, or you want to be a singer. There are a lot of people with those dreams that have pivoted. I, for one, know that I actually watched my little brother, who's 26, play video games his entire life, and now he is an executive in esports, and he still plays video games and gets a lot of money. So, poo-poo on me, trying to, turn off that damn Xbox. I know people one of my best friends who helped me write Let Me Hear a Rhyme, wanted to be a rapper, and now he's actually teaching hip-hop education. It doesn't matter. It's still a part of his dream. It's still a part of their dream. And so I'm hoping that you all take that into consideration. Take me as literally an example of someone that actually had a dream since she was 4 and has pivoted in a lot of different ways, but I'm very much still here. And so I'm hoping you all follow your dreams as well too. So that's really the end of my speech there, right? And look at that, we have plenty of time for questions. So I'm gonna sit down because I'm old. We're not really old. And I could probably, it's actually has really good acoustics in here. Shout out to the tech team. So why don't we start with you, young man? Okay, Hi. Yes. Wait, first of all, big ups to this man. All right. You have stunned me because not many people get that. And yes, the crown on the cover of Let Me Hear a Rhyme is very much a nod to Jean Basquiat's work. So yes, thank you. That was amazing. Yes. The best book I've ever read. Oh, man. This is any author that's in here, that's the best book I ever read. But my favorite book is called Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward. I'm also a big fan of The Bluest Eyes by Toni Morrison. I loved, I'm going to blank on this woman's name. Wait Till Helen Comes by, thank you. And I'm trying to think of some other books. There's so many. And like whenever you ask an author this question, they completely blank, like as if there's not like a billion books sitting in their room, like or sitting on their table or whatever. But yeah. Yes. Wow. Okay, yes. Favorite book that I made? Well, it's like picking a favorite child. And parents don't really have that. They do. Don't let them lie to you. My favorite book is probably Allegedly. And probably because it made me an author. Kind of like the way, first kids make someone a mother. So it's probably my favorite book because it's probably the book that people still get, mad at me about. Because if you don't know, all of my books have, plot twists. Or good, actually, maybe one doesn't. So I get a lot of fun reader mail with people still angry with me about the endings of a lot of my books. So, I'm like, oh, look at this fun little mail. Yay. So that's probably. And then the book after that will probably be my last book, which is The Weight of Blood. That's actually the book that I find is the best written book. Which is saying a lot because I've been writing for a really long time, and it's my 6th book. If I put all my work together, that's my 9th book, actually. And it's my best work to date. And so I will say that for some people for any of the writers in the room, just know that you do actually get better over time. It's still going to be hard because any author in here will attest that every book that we start, it's why, am I a writer? Who do I think I am trying to write something? But yes, thank you. I think there's yes, sir? My favorite author. All right, okay, I'll give him some props today. Jason Reynolds is actually one of my favorite authors. And I troll him all the time, so, no one tell him this today, because, that'll just mess up my thing. We'll mess up our vibe this week. But he's prolific, and he's amazing with his words, and it's just incredible the way he writes. It makes me feel like every story reminds me of all of the cousins I grew up with, in Brooklyn. So I love his work. There was one all the way in the back, yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh, man, that's a hard one. Because the one thing about television and movies is that sometimes it could take a long time. So, any teen that I love today, by the time we get to them, it's like a whole grown-ass man. And so, so I'm always struggling with, with these characters and stuff like that. But I think, I'm trying to think of some, I love all the kids in that series called The Shy. They are all, amazing. And there is, gosh, I'm forgetting this girl. Let me come back to you on that one, because it's going to come to me as we're, sitting here. Yes. What inspires my book covers? Ooh, that's a great question. So generally the principle is that authors actually don't have any say in our covers. We give creative inspiration. So sometimes we'll give comp covers, meaning that we love what this cover looks like. Can we get a cover that looks like this? And a lot of times, I've been very fortunate to work very directly with the graphics, with the design team. So usually I put together mood boards and I'm like, I'm looking for this type of typography with this and stuff like that. And they literally take my mood board and give it to the designer and they're like, okay, go. And that's not usually the rule, or I'm very much an exception. So don't tell any of the authors in here that I get special treatment. But no, I know a lot of authors actually do put together mood boards because they are looking for like a specific theme. But sometimes I've seen some terrible covers in this industry. And what I love actually seeing is kids recreating covers, like putting their own spin on stuff. Like I love seeing that. Or I love seeing actually kids coming up with like, their own ending to the stories or putting like a part 2 on it. Like that's like my favorite kind of like, creativity or favorite assignments I've seen actually to date. Yes. The hardest book I ever had to write was probably Grown, because it was a last minute decision to write that book. So I had about like 6 weeks to write it. And I was also touring, so I wrote I wrote about a good 20,000 words on my phone because I was touring at the same time. So a lot of the first chapters were actually on my phone. And I originally wanted that book to be a book in verse. And so I tried that. And then I was like, oh, I am nobody's Elizabeth Azevedo. Let me, have a seat. Let me stay in my lane. And so I went back and I started writing differently from there. So that was probably my heart. And it was also emotionally taxing because it was going back to memories that, I had buried deep. But I knew it was important to talk about those emotions and talk about the feelings of just, the shame behind it as well, too. So I think that was also probably the hardest book I wrote to date. Yes. Which author I would like to collaborate with? I would love to do a horror series with Lamar Giles. He just wrote a book called The Getaway. And I collaborate actually a good bit right now because I did the book with Elias Sabaz, and I'm doing the Blackout series, which also had Whiteout that just came out as well too. And collaborating with 5 other authors, 6 of us, we're basically like Wu-Tang of YA. So that could be it could be intense. Yes. Did my ADHD interfere with my writing process? Sometimes it can. As you know, a lot of people think that ADHD, like we're just kind of like looking at the clouds or whatever for whatever reason. But actually there are times where like we get super hyper focused. So there are days where I spend like a solid 3 days working on one paragraph. Oh, 100% helped me more because without my ADHD, I'm very particular about like specifics in my book, which is why all of my books actually have like binders full of research and stuff like that. So whenever people start to like come to me like, oh, this didn't happen, I pull out my binder and I'm like, let me pull out the receipts. Let me pull out the notes. Like that's exactly how I work. I still actually use the whole highlighter method. My to-do list is always in blue ink. I still listen to a lot of books on tape. That was like the biggest thing that I did because I still listen to books, not on Audible, Libby. I still use the Libby app. So there's a lot of things that I learned from the Learning Center that I still use and apply. And even the way that like I write today, there are times where like I forget to finish a sentence and I go back. And so me and my editor call it the ADHD check. So like that, there's a one draft that like literally we're just going through to make sure that I actually finish sentences and stuff like that. That I finished the thought that I actually had instead of just skipping on to the next paragraph. So yeah, it's definitely been like, something that but I mean, I've also had, I've had this for a while. Some of the things that has helped me in like even in my production work in like film and television work, definitely, because we're looking at things differently than everyone else, and that makes us a bit sharper than every other tool in the box. Yes. I'm kind of like in the middle. I'm a scenester. So I write like a screenwriter because I went to film school. So I still follow what is called the Sid Fields like paradigm. I write in a 3-act structure. I have, a point in the book where I'm like, everyone needs to know the plot of the book by the first 50 pages. And I look at other people's books and I'm like, if I don't know what's happening by page 50, I'm throwing your book away. Like, I'm not, no. There's climax and stuff like that. So I often encourage people who want to be writers to consider taking a screenwriting course, because that really does help with your pacing and your plotting and everything like that. So I definitely write in scenes. I even write in like a 4-act structure or, a 6-act structure if I'm like thinking of like sitcom television, if I'm trying to be funny, which I'm not. I'm not really that funny. But red shirt right over here. As I sit on the stage, sir. I am an introvert by nature. It is taking a lot for me to get on stages and hold mics and talk to people. Like I said, I really thought I was going to be the old woman by the sea. I already planned my home in Jamaica that I was going to live in for the rest of my life, but now here I am. Hi. All the way in the back, green. Yeah. I love Easter eggs. That's like my favorite part, especially with like plot twists and stuff like that. Like, we have to have Easter eggs in there. One of my favorite Easter eggs is actually in my first book, Allegedly. The character Mary is actually named after Mary Bell, who is actually the first 9-year-old serial killer. And not many people got that. Most of the UK got it because she was based in the UK. But not many people always like catch that part. So, yes. Blue shirt, yes. Do I relate to any of my characters? And aside from grown, there's a couple of things. Like, I've definitely experienced a lot of microaggressions that happened to Maddie in The Way to Blood. In Let Me Hear a Rhyme, it takes place like, in the 90s and hip hop era, and that was definitely like me for sure. Other than that, and also Monday's Not Coming, the book about the missing girl. There was a time where my bestest friend was out of school for 3 weeks, and I realized when she was gone, and we were in the 3rd grade at this point, I realized when she was gone, I had no other friends, and that, I could not survive without her. And so I was the person who was looking for her the most. She sprained her ankle. She was out of school for 3 weeks. She was so dramatic. But like, I at that point didn't know I could like exist in a world without my best friend. And I always try to encourage people to understand like the level of friend, like what best friendships is really like. Like, how many of you all have best friends in here? And it could be your dog, your grandma, like, don't worry about it. But your best friend is, quite frankly, the first love of your life. They know where the bodies are buried. They know everything about you. They will know more about you than your mother, your father, anyone else in between. And so if you do have a best friend, you need to hold on to them, and it's going to feel like holding on to light. And so I think that's super important for people to understand, is that best friendships is like, a type of different relationship that you just never can understand. And so that same best friend that was missing for 3 weeks, all that emotion, all that tension, I definitely put into Monday's Not Coming. We are still best friends to this day. We've been best friends since we were 6. We are now 40. Yeah, we're 40. Jesus, I don't know how old I am. And now she lives in we live in whole different states now. Before, I couldn't even go like a couple of days without her. But now I'm like, oh, hey. I think we have time for one last question. So there is one right here with a black shirt. Oh, that's a great question. So, being a scenester, right? We typically outline. we outline the story, we have an idea where we want to go, etc. But I think the best part about knowing where you want to go next is knowing how you want to end a chapter. So for instance, and I didn't know this until I actually had an event with R.L. Stine, and he gave this advice. He said to end every chapter with a cliffhanger. If you've ever read any of Goosebumps or anything, you'll realize that every chapter ends with a cliffhanger. And I literally gasped on the panel because I didn't realize that I was doing that too, because I have been reading his books all of my life. I basically just completely adopted his swag and said that I'm going to end. And so literally every chapter of my books end with some type of cliffhanger, and it keeps you kind of going, right? It keeps you wanting to like read the next chapter, etc. And so that's honestly where I come from, is that I want to make sure that that chapter ends with a cliffhanger, so it makes you want to go to the next chapter and figure out what you want to read. And so that's how I know how to end a chapter, basically. So I want to thank y'all for coming out to like listen to me.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for sharing your time and talents. We really appreciate it. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, we have a raffle drawing. Claire Cushing, are you here? She's not here. We will allow that.